Hi everyone, I'm Elise, and today we're talking about what it means to be overlooked, underestimated, and quietly plotting your way out from under it. Picture this: fluorescent lighting that hums just loud enough to kill your thoughts, breakroom that smells like betrayal and overcooked popcorn, and a job title so low on the org chart it might as well be written in invisible ink. I was sitting across from Denise in HR. Her cardigan was beige, her tone was beige, even her smile had the warmth of a locked printer. I'd just handed her a 14-page document. Not a complaint, not a list of demands, just a cold, factual record of everything I had done over the last 9 months. Systems I'd repaired, vendors I'd onboarded, issues I'd extinguished, like a one-woman compliance fire department. And do you know what she said? "Sweetheart, this is a corporate office, not Shark Tank. We don't negotiate with junior staff." I didn't blink. I didn't argue. I just nodded like I was tucking a bullet into a chamber made of spreadsheets and quiet rage. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I'm doing here. Oh, and drop a comment with your city and local time. I want to know where my fellow cubicle survivors are tuning in from. Let me take you back, just 1 week earlier. I was eating lukewarm instant noodles in the break room, the kind of noodles that cling to your plastic fork like they know your salary. The microwave beeped, releasing the scent of despair and someone else's burnt popcorn. I was surrounded by posters about wellness and team synergy while manually reconciling a vendor import that should have been automated in 2019. Our tools were broken. Our systems were duct-taped together with outdated APIs and faith. Half the integrations looked like someone shoved spaghetti code into a wood chipper and let Steve from IT stitch it back together during a mild panic attack. But I stayed. I patched. I rerouted. I tracked down a ghost billing error that had been bleeding $22,000 a month since March, and no one even noticed. Brad, my manager, who once CC'd himself on a message he was replying to, spent the week demoing our Slack emoji wall to new interns like he invented communication. So yeah, when I walked into HR, it wasn't ego, it wasn't arrogance, it was data. It was math. It was exhaustion. I didn't want a parade. I wanted a raise, or at least recognition that I was wringing blood from a keyboard while the rest of the team played email ping-pong. But Denise, in all her pastel authority, tilted, her head like she was trying to hear my soul crumple. "We really do value you," she chirped. "We just have to be fair to the rest of the team." Right. The team that collectively panic-slacked me when I took one sick day. The same team that managed to lock out 3 vendor portals in 24 hours like nervous breakdowns in a trench coat. Still, I didn't scream. I didn't sob. I went home, brewed a sad mug of stale peppermint tea, opened my personal laptop, and logged into LinkedIn for the first time in 6 months. I didn't even update my headline. I just started scrolling. Every vendor we'd worked with. Every partner we'd half onboarded. Every logistics firm we ever CC'd in a group thread. My search history became a hit list. 2 days later, I got a message. "Hey, your name came up during an internal audit. You're the one who fixed our contract portal. Last quarter, right?" It was from a senior analyst at GenAxis Logistics, one of our oldest clients. I'd personally walked them through 3 onboarding disasters and 2 outages that our team caused and forgot to apologize for. They wanted to pick my brain. I took PTO. I told Brad I was getting dental work done. He barely looked up from his phone. I sat across from that senior analyst in a real office with real coffee, talking through real systems. They weren't looking for a chat. They were looking for a cleaner, someone to make sense of the mess their vendor, my company, had left them with. Before I left, they handed me a folder. "Just think about it," they said. It was an offer, better title, better pay, more autonomy. Oh, and they needed help prepping for their upcoming vendor audit. The vendor? My company. I walked home in a fog, the kind that slices through your coat and lands in your bones. but I was smiling. Not like someone who won the lottery. More like someone who just saw the floor creak under the feet of the man who thought he was safe. So I didn't scream. I didn't storm out. I sharpened the knife. I started small. 2 nights after the coffee meeting, I opened a private spreadsheet on my personal laptop and began entering names, vendors, support contacts, anyone who'd ever reached out to me directly when things went sideways. I cross-referenced emails, reviewed old tickets, and compiled a silent, surgical list. The kind of list you only make when you realize you're not just looking to leave, you're planning to leave an echo. During the day, I was the same Elise. Quiet, efficient, appropriately invisible. I said good morning, just loud enough to be polite, and took notes in meetings where no one asked for my opinion. Brad still called me kiddo, even though I was older than him by 2 years and had twice his technical certs. He once asked me to make a dashboard less aggressive because the pie chart colors made leadership nervous. But by night, I was a ghost in their machine. I reviewed vendor workflows from memory, sketched out broken credential chains on sticky notes, and built diagrams that explained more about our infrastructure than any official documentation ever did. I wasn't just remembering the flaws, I was mapping them, like a cartographer of corporate neglect. Then came the email. That changed everything. Subject: Quick Sync Vendor Audit. Prep Sender: James, Senior Systems Director, Gen Axis Logistics. It was short, almost casual, said he'd been reviewing an old support trail and kept seeing my name pop up. We figured you were the one doing all the real work. He wanted to meet again. Nothing formal, just a chat. I said yes, of course. We met in a conference room at their downtown office, a room that smelled like citrus and clean decisions. Their whiteboard still had notes from the last vendor outage, faint but readable. Someone had circled "Need real support" in red marker and underlined it 3 times. James offered me espresso. I accepted like I hadn't spent the last 6 months choking down breakroom mud water filtered through despair. "We're not trying to throw your company under the bus," he began. I smiled. Of course not. "But the truth is," he said, leaning forward, "your name pops up every time something actually gets fixed. And our systems, well, they're bleeding out." He listed the issues. 3 failed logins triggering ticket loops, billing files arriving encrypted in a format they deprecated 2 years ago, single sign-on attempts that routed admin resets to an abandoned inbox. All of it tied back to my employer. All of it except me. I didn't oversell myself. I didn't have to. The room knew. I could feel it. They had followed the breadcrumbs I never got credit for. We just need someone to come in, quietly, and help stabilize things before the audit. They weren't offering me a side gig. They were offering me gloves, a scalpel, and a patient on the table. I didn't say yes. Not immediately, but I did say I'd think about it. I walked home with a takeout box I didn't remember ordering. It was heavy, like my inbox, which buzzed at 1:13 a.m. Subject: Formal offer. Systems liaison. Consulting phase. No pressure, the message said. We'd love to have you on board before Q4. The kicker? They needed someone who could interpret the vendor landscape like it was a murder scene, and I already knew where the bodies were buried. That night, I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it Housekeeping. Inside, 1 file. My resignation. Letter, dated, unsigned, but ready. By that Friday, I was working 2 jobs, 1 official, 1 off the books. At the office, I was polishing dashboards for Brad, formatting reports he barely skimmed, and nodding along in meetings that made less sense than the company birthday card rotation. I'd get emails asking me to clean up, spreadsheets that hadn't been updated since before the last reorg. But at home, I was building a war room. I color-coded systems diagrams. I annotated logs. I annotated the annotations. On weekends, I reviewed login trails and noticed credential gaps that had been patched over with silence. On Sundays, I turned them into decks, polished, neutral-sounding slides full of recommendations and priority flags that just so happened to implicate every person who ever told me to stay in my lane. I wasn't just preparing an audit, I was writing a story, and every chapter began with a moment I'd been ignored. Gen Axis ate it up. They looped me into private Slack channels. I started getting invites to Zoom meetings labeled off-record. At first, I was background noise. Then I was the one people asked for. They called me the bridge, the one who knew both sides. And here's the ironic part. I never lied. I never broke NDA. I didn't steal a single byte of data. Everything I gave them was mine, my diagrams, my reconstructions, my memory. The things I built on my own time, in my own space. By the second week, Gen Axis gave me sandbox access. They trusted me, and why wouldn't they? I was the one still bailing water while my team made TikToks during outages. I was the weapon. Back at the office, nothing changed. Brad asked me to add a drop shadow to a pie chart. Denise gave me a nod in the hallway like I was a ficus she forgot to water. No one noticed. The fire I was building under their feet. And when I tell you I was calm, I mean calm like a loaded spreadsheet waiting to explode. The Monday I walked back into the building, the air shifted. Subtle, cold, like the tension right before a thunderclap. Same beige lobby, same smell of scorched toner and diluted ambition. But this time, I wasn't carrying my laptop in a canvas, tote with a motivational pin. I was in a navy blazer tailored just enough to say, "I see your hierarchy and raise you documentation." My badge read, "Guest, Gen Axis," but it might as well have said, "Spectre of Accountability, Security." Waved me through without a glance. At the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirrored panel. Same eyes, same lips, same spine. But this time, I wasn't invisible. When the doors opened on the 4th floor, the reaction was instant. Kyle from Data practically dislocated his neck doing a double take. 2 engineers whispered as I passed, one of them mouthing, "Is that her?" Like I'd risen from the dead instead of from their incompetence. And then there she was, Denise, HR, denim skirt, clip-on smile. She stood outside the fishbowl conference room clutching her reusable water bottle like it was a shield. "Welcome back," she said, tone cheerful enough to make dogs bark. "Thanks," I replied. "I'm here for the audit." Her smile faltered. A flicker. Not panic, yet. More like the sound of a safe unlocking in the back of her brain. "You're assisting the team from Gen Axis?" I opened my laptop just enough for her to see the header on my screen. Lead Systems Auditor, External Compliance Liaison. The way her throat clicked when she swallowed? Chef's kiss. Inside the glass box of corporate reckoning, Greg, the VP of Operations who once told me I had great potential once I matured professionally, stood up so fast he knocked over his coffee. It splashed across a pile of printed spreadsheets that, fun fact, I had once rebuilt from scratch after his team deleted the originals. He wiped his hand on his tie and tried to pretend this was normal. "Didn't know you'd be joining us," he said, voice climbing like a cat. "On a wet slide? Joining?" I echoed, calmly sitting at the head of the table. "Oh no, I'm leading. Boot it up. Slide deck ready. Full systems and compliance audit. Retroactive. 12 months. Silence. Greg blinked. 12? "Yes," I said. "Per clause 9.3 of your contract with Gen Axis, they're entitled to a retrospective audit of all vendor-facing systems, integration logs, credential histories, and compliance records for the past year." Denise dropped her pen. Someone muttered a curse, under their breath. I clicked into the first slide. A visual timeline. Broken systems. Unresolved tickets. Expired certs. All tied together with quiet, deadly precision. By day 3, the room felt 10 degrees colder. Every meeting was heavier. Legal joined via Zoom. Finance started hanging around the door like nervous interns trying to look busy. The VP of Ops looked like he was trying to digest gravel every time I spoke. Then came the crown jewel, a spreadsheet, shared credentials, XLSX stored in a public SharePoint folder. File name, vendor access, final V4 edited real use this .xlsx. Opened it on the main screen. Clicked it slow, deliberate. Theater but earned. This one's my favorite, I said, sipping lukewarm conference coffee. The sheet was unencrypted. No access log. Modified 9 times. Last touched by... wait for it. An intern. 3 of those. Logins came from IPs based in New Jersey, which, by the way, did not match their VPN footprint. Denise made a sound like a mouse being emotionally blackmailed. That file was never meant to be permanent, she said. No kidding, I replied. Your compliance policy explicitly prohibits storing shared credentials in unsecured repositories. And yet, here we are. Greg cleared his throat, trying to manufacture leadership. Well, it's hard to say who exactly was responsible. Probably the junior analyst before, he trailed off. The room turned to me. I believe it was me. The silence could have made a priest flinch. I let it sit for 3 full seconds, then I slid a folder across the table. I'd be happy to submit a formal statement. Would you like that notarized? Legal, on Zoom, unmuted just to cough. By end of day, GenAxis suspended all payments to my former employer pending internal review. Procurement froze. Support escalations doubled. Slack channels ignited with leadership pinging junior developers for answers they never trained them to have. That night, James from GenAxis texted me. Nice work. Keep going. Let's see what else. We find... Oh, I planned to. I'd barely started the integrations directory. The real rot hadn't even begun to stink. I came back with documentation. They gave me ghost. The days that followed weren't loud. They were surgical. I didn't raise my voice. I raised flags, real ones, with metadata, cross-referenced logs, time-stamped proof. I walked into conference rooms carrying silence like a scalpel, and every time I spoke, it cut. My findings folder began to look less like an audit report and more like a digital crime scene. We're talking credential chains that looped like a Mobius strip, admin accounts with no expiration policies, API keys embedded in front-end code. I wasn't surprised. I had been flagging these issues in Jira tickets for months, and every one of them got quietly closed or pushed to future backlog. Now they were being projected onto 70-inch screens, while execs stared at them like they were looking at ghosts. Because that's the thing about being ignored for long enough. You learn to keep receipts, and I had them. All of them. There was one ticket, archived so deep it practically had moss on it, where I'd flagged a billing integration that had been fixed with a hard-coded delay and zero validation. That same patch had been causing discrepancies in monthly reports for almost a year, and no one traced it back to the Band-Aid until I pointed at the screen and said, "This right here is where you lost $84,000. Greg leaned forward and asked, "And who implemented that?" I stared him straight in the eye. Brad signed off on it. The air left the room like it was trying to escape the building. Brad didn't show up to the next morning's meeting. Instead, I got a cryptic LinkedIn update from him that read, "Sometimes, the best growth comes after a storm. Excited for what's next. Cool story, Brad. Say hi to the unemployment line." Denise? She went quiet. HR had retreated into their back-office bunker, probably trying to smudge the servers with sage and passive-aggressive policy updates. I hadn't seen her in days. Her water bottle disappeared from its usual perch on the edge of the table like a retreating soldier leaving behind a helmet, and then an unexpected email. Subject, quick chat? From Arjun S., Director of Systems Strategy. A man I hadn't heard from since he told me to stay in my lane during a cross-team planning session last quarter. Now he wanted to talk about a consulting engagement. "Given your deep familiarity with our infrastructure," he wrote, We'd love to explore a short-term engagement to stabilize critical areas during this transition. Obviously, compensation would reflect your expertise. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I laughed. Not loud, just a slow, chest-deep laugh that shook dust off 1,000 ignored suggestions. I replied within 5 minutes. My rate is 5x what you used to pay me. Weekly, upfront, non-negotiable. No emojis. No fluff. They responded within the hour. We'll get back to you soon. Of course they would. Meanwhile, something new had started happening. Messages. Not from leadership, not from decision makers, from the cubicles. Hey, I heard you're working with Gen Axis now. Are they hiring? Any chance you're building a team? Things feel unstable here. I remember you flagged that SSO issue last year. I wish they'd listened. The very same developers who had once avoided eye contact in the break room were now pinging me for escape plans. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just auditing anymore. I was recruiting. I started building a list that night. People I knew were good, overlooked, dismissed, quietly carrying systems on their backs while Brad took credit and Denise handed out pamphlets. The ones who stayed late to fix broken loops. The ones who asked hard questions and got told to be more positive. I was curating my own exodus. James introduced me to Gen Axis's CIO over lunch. Real table, real silverware. No plastic forks with 3 bent prongs. They were talking about building an internal compliance task force. Something. Small. Agile. Nimble. We need people who know how to think before the system's on fire, the CIO said. People like you. People you'd hire. And just like that, I wasn't just the ghost of systems past. I was the architect of what came next. Later that week, I handed in my formal resignation, clicked through the HR portal. No tears, no drama. It felt like unsubscribing from a very dull newsletter. Denise never called, never scheduled an exit interview. I got an auto-generated email titled, Transition Guidance for Departing Junior Employees Irony. The PDF was corrupt. I renamed the file, Poetry PDF on my last day. I cleaned out my desk during the Friday lunch hour. The place was empty. Everyone had stampeded to the cafeteria to protest the new coffee vendor. No one even noticed I was gone. Left behind one sticky note. It read, It's not your systems, it's you. Then I flipped to a fresh page in my paper planner and wrote in block letters, Audit Day, Monday, underlined it, twice, and walked out without looking back. Audit Day landed like a thunderclap in slow motion. I walked into the building through the main entrance, not the side staff door with the sticky handle. Security nodded without hesitation. Badge scanned clean, Gen Axis clearance now fully in effect. My laptop bag felt heavier than usual, not from weight, but from certainty. The elevators were too quiet, the kind of quiet that anticipates bad news in a tailored suit. As I rode to the 4th floor, I smoothed the crease on my blazer and caught a flash of myself in the reflective panel again. Same woman, different rules. When the doors opened, it was like someone hit pause on the whole office. I passed by open desks where people froze mid-scroll, mid-sentence, mid-coffee sip. There was whispering. There were glances. Someone actually dropped their phone. And then I saw Brad. He was loitering near the copy room, trying hard to look casual, leaning against the wall like he hadn't just heard the footsteps of Karma wearing pointed heels. Elise? He said, eyebrows raised so high they threatened to evacuate his forehead. Morning, I replied, walking past him without slowing. He tried to catch up. So you're back? His grin was one of those painfully forced things that look more like a grimace than joy. I'm here for the audit, I said plainly. His jaw twitched. Let me guess. Gen Axis? I smiled without warmth. They requested continuity. Exhaled. Yeah, well, good luck. They go through analysts like my ex goes through houseplants. I stopped, turned. Brad, I wouldn't worry too much. I'm not here to stay. That was technically true. I wasn't here to stay. I was here to haunt. Conference room 3B had been booked under my name. The same room where Denise once handed me a laminated pamphlet titled Understanding Your Career Path. Today, it had a glass carafe of water and a screen already queued up with my first slide. Vendor Systems Audit, Phase 0, Active Failures. Greg was already inside, trying to look busy while pretending he hadn't spilled coffee on me, metaphorically and literally, for the better part of a year. When I entered, he stood up like I had the power to fire him, which, honestly, I kind of did now. The meeting began with quiet tension. Legal on Zoom. Finance silently entering on tiptoe and pretending to check their emails. Denise slipped in last, her smile a barely held-together plastic bag full of damage control. She saw the badge. She saw the title. She sat without speaking. I clicked into the audit timeline. Over the last 12 months, vendor-facing systems have exhibited critical compliance gaps, including, but not limited to, shared credential exposure, expired encryption, certificates, non-compliant onboarding procedures, and, my personal favorite, a complete absence of audit trail retention beyond 90 days. Denise visibly paled. I clicked again. A slide titled, Who Had Access? It was a list, not names, but roles. And under each role, a trail of logins, times, devices, IP mismatches. Then I hit them with the pièce de résistance. During my review, I uncovered a SharePoint folder accessible without VPN or password protection. Contained within were 17 files marked Final Use, one of which included a plain text password spreadsheet last updated by, let's see, click, intern, March 11th at 3:17 p.m. from an off-site connection. I let that hang. Then I pulled up the metadata, 3 other logins, all external IPs, none of which matched known devices. Greg spoke. Finally. I wasn't aware of that file, he muttered. You weren't aware of a lot of things, I said, voice even. I mean, who approved that protocol? I didn't blink. You did, Greg. You approved the rollback to email-based credential resets in February. I have the Slack thread if you'd like it displayed. He looked at Denise like she might teleport him to safety. She didn't. Instead, she whispered, That was never meant to be permanent. Good thing your compliance policy doesn't make exceptions for intention. I clicked again. This time, the slide was red. Risk summary. Immediate concerns. I laid them out, one by one. Unmonitored vendor ports, cross-environment credential reuse. Dev accounts still active from employees who'd left during lockdown. 3 years ago. James. From Gen Access had told me once, Don't scare them, show them they're already drowning. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to raise a single eyebrow. I just needed the evidence. And oh, I had it. As the meeting wrapped, I closed my laptop and looked around. No one spoke. Finance looked like they were doing math in their heads, and it wasn't good math. Legal nodded once. A slow, grim thing. Greg cleared his throat. We'll need to take this under review. I stood, calm and final. Of course, I've already submitted my Phase 2 timeline and access request list. And then, for dessert, I turned to Denise. Oh, and I'll need your policy documents from the last 2 fiscal years. The ones that cover incident reporting and breach acknowledgement. She tried to smile. It didn't reach her eyes. Of course, she said. But we both knew those files hadn't been updated in 27 months. I left the room with my laptop tucked under one arm like a weapon. No applause, just dread. And I swear, I heard Brad whisper as I passed his desk. I think she's here to kill us. He wasn't entirely wrong, but I wasn't here to kill anyone. I was here to document the autopsy. They say systems don't fail overnight. They rot, quietly, beneath glossy dashboards and PowerPoints that promise synergy. By the following Thursday, the rot was exposed like nerves in a root canal. Greg had gone full reactive mode, sending 11 p.m. emails flagged as high importance that no one answered. Denise disappeared entirely from the audit floor, likely hiding behind some HR firewall, drafting passive-aggressive memos to refocus internal narratives. Meanwhile, I wasn't even trying to scare them. I was just doing my job. Slide by slide, ticket by ticket, I presented a sequence of errors so severe they might as well have been sabotage, except no one had to sabotage anything. They had done it to themselves through a decade of laziness dressed in legacy compatibility, and then came the cherry on top, a legacy integration patch. One I remembered because I'd hand-fixed it myself, undocumented, on a Sunday afternoon, while everyone else was at a team-building brunch. They'd forgotten it existed. I hadn't. The patch was still active, routing sensitive vendor data through an outdated endpoint with no SSL enforcement. Worse? The access logs showed hits as recent as last week. When I brought it up in the next audit session, Denise muttered, "Something about unforeseen exceptions." "Denise," I said, "this endpoint is hard-coded with a default password and no MFA. It's not an exception. It's an open invitation." The legal liaison on Zoom visibly rubbed their forehead. "And Greg?" He tried to counter with a pivot. "We've had a few process gaps, sure, but they're isolated." I tapped the keyboard. Another slide. Vendor breaches. Incident trail. Q2, Q3. 5 incidents. 3 months. Each traced back to user behavior. Credential mismanagement or delayed patches. "Isolated?" I asked, letting the word breathe. Greg shifted in his seat like it was slowly turning into a bear trap. I ended the session with a final statement, plain and dry. These findings suggest not negligence, but normalized malpractice. You could feel the room flinch. No one spoke for 12 seconds. I counted. That night, Gen Axis made it official. Email from James. "We're suspending all current contracts pending termination review. Effective immediately. 12 words. No." Exclamation point. No emojis, just a scalpel in text. By morning, Brad had posted another LinkedIn status. This one read, "Sometimes, letting go of the old is the only way to build the new. Excited for this next chapter." Translation: I got fired and my severance is tied to silence. Denise never posted anything. She must have known what was coming, because room 3B had been booked under my name again. Same time, same table. This time, it wasn't for an audit. It was for a transition review. Gen Axis wasn't just dropping the contract. They were absorbing the entire operation, and I was the one chosen to lead the new internal department. Director of Systems Integrity and Oversight Office. With a door, real door, no cubicle walls or open plan for creative synergy. BS, same hallway, same floor. Just a badge that finally matched my capability. James handed it to me with a nod. "You've earned this," he said. And I had. When the door opened at 2 RPM, Denise walked in with her water bottle and that brittle professionalism she wore like expired perfume. I gestured to the seat across from me, the one I used to occupy in silence. She sat, wordless, pale. I slid a folder across the table. Termination recommendations, compliance failures. Her name was halfway down the first page. She reached for the paper with trembling fingers, and I didn't stop her. "You once told me we don't negotiate with junior staff," I said, calm as glass. "Well," I added, "we do now." Pause. "But not with people like you." She blinked, slow and quiet. And in that stillness, I realized something. This wasn't revenge. It was realignment. The systems were finally in the right hands, and this time, mine were at the top. I didn't decorate the new office. Not at first. It felt too clean, like a freshly poured foundation that hadn't earned its walls yet. There were no cat posters, no novelty mugs, just a matte black laptop, a stack of yellow legal pads, and one single sticky note: build quietly. Outside the glass door, the old world kept shuffling, former coworkers still circling like satellites around fading titles. Some gave me the nod. Others wouldn't meet my eyes, and some finally knew. Noticed. Recognized me for what I'd always been, the one actually keeping the lights on. Gen Axis wasted no time. Within 2 weeks of the audit's conclusion, the transition was live. Vendor accounts were frozen. Systems began migrating to our new stack, one I helped spec, design, and secure. They gave me full reign to build it right. No red tape, no empty committees, and best of all, I got to pick my team. I started with the messages in my inbox, quiet pings from quiet people. Hey, I heard you moved. I remember how you fixed that mess no one else could. If you ever need someone who actually gives a damn, I'm interested. I kept a spreadsheet. Of course I did. It wasn't about hiring friends. It was about hiring people who had carried the weight without applause. People who had patched without praise. People who knew that a silent fix was still a victory. I called them back one by one. Not everyone was ready. Not everyone said yes. But the ones who did, they weren't just employees. They were survivors. Our first all hands took place in a room with no PowerPoint, just whiteboards, snacks that weren't expired, chairs that didn't squeak. I stood at the front with dry erase markers and a mission statement I didn't need to rehearse. Fix what they broke, build what they never imagined, and never ever forget who did the work. The team bought in. You could feel it in the air, like static before a storm, but this time we controlled the lightning. Meanwhile, back at my old company, the walls were crumbling. Greg's attempt at saving face failed spectacularly. An internal memo leaked, one where he blamed unauthorized access patterns for the audit exposure. Problem was, the access was all documented, authorized, requested by me. Denise never made it to her HR town hall presentation. She resigned 2 days before it. The official story said, personal reasons. Unofficially, she was named in 3 separate findings reports for non-compliance, breach mismanagement, and credential oversight negligence. Funny how paperwork works when someone's actually keeping track. One by one, I watched the old guard fall. Some with LinkedIn posts, some in silence, and some reached out. Any chance you're hiring? I'd love to work in an environment that actually values integrity. I know I didn't always speak up, but I admired how you handled everything. At first, I wasn't sure how to respond. There was a part of me, the part still nursing stale peppermint tea in the dark, that wanted to ignore them, but I didn't. I replied with questions. What did you build? What did you fix when no one was watching? What would you have done differently if someone had let you? Some didn't reply. Others did, with clarity, with humility, with ideas. I invited 2 of them in for interviews. One now runs our API integrity flow. The other rewrote our vendor audit pipeline from scratch in a week. Both were once sidelined. In the name of team optics. Now, they're pillars. And I finally got my first real desk setup, dual monitors, mechanical keyboard, a sticky note that said, "Remember what they called you," and next to it, another. They were wrong. It happened on a Tuesday, no confetti, no fanfare, just an email, 2 sentences long, carbon copied to every exec who once misspelled my name in meeting invites. Subject: formal termination of vendor agreement due to persistent non-compliance and critical security failures. Gen Axis is terminating all relationships with former employer name redacted. Effective immediately. That was it. By noon, The silence from my old office was louder than any resignation speech. Slack channels went dark. Procurement froze. I received no less than 5 messages from former colleagues in under an hour. Some asked if it was true. Some already knew, and some asked if I was hiring. Greg posted a LinkedIn update that afternoon, something vague and desperate. Thriving through change. Open to advisory roles. Passionate about agile resilience and cross-functional harmony. If buzzwords were currency, Greg could have retired. Denise? No update, no status. Just a ghost in the HR wilderness. But I knew where she was going next, because conference room 3B had been reserved once again, same chair, same windows. But this time, it wasn't me sitting hunched, hoping for someone to see the spreadsheet behind the spreadsheet. Now I was the one waiting, folder open. She walked in 5 minutes late, holding a leather-bound notebook like it might protect her. Her badge looked out of place, her smile non-existent. "Denise," I said, nodding at the chair across from me. She sat. I didn't. I walked her through the findings. Slow. Calm. Just the facts. Every non-compliant protocol, every training she ignored, every signature on expired policy docs that should have been reviewed a year ago. Her name wasn't at the top of the list, but it was there, and that's what mattered. I slid the termination recommendation toward her like it was a bill long overdue. "I wanted to make sure you heard it directly," I said. "We do negotiate now." Pause. But not with people who mistake silence for weakness. She didn't argue. She just blinked, slow and sharp. A reflex born from someone who finally realizes they were never in control. And that was it. That meeting ended without drama. No shouts. No defense, just the quiet resignation of someone who finally understood they'd been audited by a ghost who never left. That evening, I poured myself something strong and earned. And when my inbox pinged again, it was from someone new, an external compliance director at another logistics firm. One who had been watching Gen Axis's transformation. They'd heard about me. From who, they wouldn't say. But the message was short. "We're due for an overhaul. And we heard you don't just fix, you rebuild." I closed my laptop with a smile that felt different than before. Not smug, not victorious, just aligned. Because I wasn't junior anymore. I wasn't overlooked. I wasn't the one asked to take better notes or smile more in meetings. I was the storm, and the ones who tried to drown me? They'd never learned to swim. So if you're watching this, sitting in a cubicle that smells like stale coffee and passive aggression, if you've been working late fixing other people's messes while getting emails about team culture and birthday cards from people who don't know your last name, know this, you're not alone, and when the time comes to walk out, walk with a plan, because ghosts don't knock. They walk through walls you thought would hold. The story ends here. If you found this video meaningful, if it made you nod, even once, hit that subscribe button to support and follow future stories. I wish you only the best things.